I built a $75 million empire. Then my father gave it to my brother. A video description for Destiny Rewritten Power, Betrayal, Revenge. At Destiny Rewritten, we bring you gripping tales of ambition, deception, and ultimate victories. In this episode, witness the shocking story of a woman who built an empire, only to have it stolen from her in an instant. But fate belongs to those bold enough to rewrite it. Watch as power shifts, alliances crumble, and a legacy is reclaimed. Drop a comment. What would you have done in her place? Subscribe now for more real-life stories of success, revenge, and redemption. Destiny Rewritten. Betrayal. Revenge story. Success. Power moves. Corporate drama. Ambition. Leadership. Plot twist. Storytelling. Boardroom wars. Don't just watch. Drop a comment and share your thoughts. Because power is never given. It's taken. The Welcome to Destiny Rewritten Power. Betrayal. Revenge. Stories of those who refused to be erased. Tales of the underestimated who rose to the top. What if everything you built, every sleepless night, every battle you fought, was stolen from you in an instant? What if the people you trusted the most decided you were never meant to win? But here's the thing about fate. It belongs to those bold enough to rewrite it. At Destiny Rewritten, we don't just tell stories. We expose the power struggles, the silent wars, and the ultimate victories of those who refuse to be forgotten. You're about to witness the kind of twists that leave you speechless, the kind of revenge that reshapes empires, the kind of power plays that prove one simple truth. Power isn't given, it's taken. Hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment below, because every great battle deserves an audience. Now, let's begin. Saikigiyar. On the calm before the storm. The family dinner that changed everything. The clink of crystal glasses filled the air, an expensive champagne bubbling under the warm glow of golden chandeliers. Laughter rippled across the grand dining hall as waiters in pressed uniforms wove between guests, refilling glasses, clearing plates, ensuring the illusion of perfection remained unbroken. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. My celebration. The company I had spent 12 years saving, the company that was once weeks away from bankruptcy, had finally reached $75 million in valuation. The contracts I had secured, the sleepless nights I had endured, the countless sacrifices I made to keep it alive, it all led to this moment. And yet, as I sat there at the long, polished mahogany table, surrounded by extended family, shareholders, and business elites, something felt off. My father sat at the head of the table, his presence a force that commanded respect. A man built from steel, raised in a time when loyalty was currency and power was held in a fist, not a handshake. To his right sat my younger brother Nathan, the golden child. A man whose failures were swept under the rug, whose recklessness was excused as ambition. He was smiling, not his usual self-assured grin, but something colder, calculated, as if he already knew something I didn't. A slow sense of unease crawled up my spine. Then my father rose to his feet. The room fell silent. He lifted his glass of champagne, a smile spreading across his face, but there was something beneath it, something rehearsed. "I want to take a moment," he began, voice deep and unwavering, "to acknowledge the hard work that has brought our company to where it is today." A murmur of approval. Heads nodded. My heart pounded in my chest. For years we have built this empire as a family, and tonight I am proud to announce that it is time for the next generation to take the reins. The murmurs grew into applause. People raised their glasses, anticipating a grand announcement, and for a fleeting moment I thought I knew what was coming. Nathan will be taking over as CEO. The air was sucked from the room. I heard the words, I understood them, but they made no sense. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. My pulse drummed against my ribs. I felt the weight of 100 eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. Nathan, still smiling, leaned back in his chair. He didn't look surprised, because he already knew this was planned. The decision was made long before this dinner, and I wasn't even considered. The sound of betrayal. The applause grew louder. Fake smiles, forced cheers. They were celebrating my destruction. I watched as my father placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder, a gesture of pride, as if he were crowning his successor. I swallowed, forcing down the burning wave of anger and disbelief that clawed at my chest. 12 years. 12 years of sacrificing my personal life, of fighting through every corporate war, of cleaning up every mess this company made, all to be cast aside like I was nothing. Nathan? He hadn't earned this. He had spent the last decade burning through opportunities, failing upwards with the safety net of our last name. A string of failed businesses, reckless decisions, and wasted investments. But none of it mattered. Because in our family, bloodline was more important than ability. Nathan wasn't chosen because he was qualified. He was chosen because he was the son. And me? I was just a temporary stand-in, a placeholder until they decided it was time for the rightful heir to step in. I didn't flinch. I could feel my mother's eyes on me from across the table. She didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked resigned. She had seen this coming. She had warned me in whispers years ago when I first started taking control of the business. No matter what you build, no matter what you prove, in the end, he will never see you as the one meant to lead. And she had been right. But still, I had believed. I had believed that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself beyond all doubt, he would see me as his equal, as worthy. But in that moment, as he raised his glass in celebration of my replacement, I realized the truth. He never had, and he never would. But while they were raising their glasses, while Nathan was soaking in the applause, while my father believed he had just dictated my fate, I smiled. I smiled because they didn't know the real game I had been playing. They thought I was walking away empty-handed. But I had spent years preparing for this moment. They had underestimated me, and that was going to be their biggest mistake. The war begins. Tomorrow. I lifted my glass. My hand was steady. My voice was smooth. To Nathan, I said, my smile never wavering. May you get everything you deserve. The table cheered. Nathan raised his glass back, smirking. He had no idea. None of them did. But tomorrow they would, because I was not leaving. I was not stepping aside. I had built this empire, and I was going to keep it, by any means necessary. To be continued. Like, comment, and subscribe to Destiny Rewritten for more real-life stories of power, betrayal, and ultimate revenge. A legacy not meant for me, the story they never saw coming, the weight of a name to the world. Renshaw Global was an empire, a logistics giant that connected industries, powered economies, and made my family name synonymous with success. To me, it was the battlefield where I had fought, sacrificed, and bled for over 12 years, only to be cast aside like an outsider. My father, William Renshaw, had built the company from scratch. He wasn't a businessman by nature, but he had sheer grit, and in the early years, that was enough to keep it afloat. But he had always been a man of old traditions, a believer that titles were inherited, not earned. He spent more time at power lunches than in boardrooms, shaking hands with men who had never built anything in their lives. To him, appearances mattered more than results. And I was never supposed to be more than a placeholder. A daughter in his world was meant to support, not lead, but I was not made for the shadows. Rebuilding what he let rot. When I stepped into Renshaw Global at 24, it was on the verge of collapse. The board hid the real numbers, the senior executives lived in comfortable denial, and my father? He was too blinded by the illusion of legacy to see that the company was sinking. I saw what they didn't want to admit. The company wasn't growing, it was surviving on past deals, stuck in a world that no longer existed. Logistics had evolved, but Renshaw Global hadn't. So I made changes. I streamlined operations, cutting costs by 40% using AI-driven logistics. I secured multi-million-dollar contracts, expanding into global markets my father never even considered. I rebuilt the brand from the inside out, replacing stagnant leadership with people who actually understood innovation. I took the company from a liability to a powerhouse, raising its valuation to $75 million. I thought my father would finally see me. I thought he would realize that I was the future of Renshaw Global. I was wrong. The unspoken truth of legacy. One thing my father always refused to admit was that Nathan was a failure. My younger brother, Nathan Renshaw, had been handed everything, and still, he couldn't keep it together. His first business venture, a failed tech startup that burned through millions before collapsing. His investment portfolio, a graveyard of failed ideas, lost money, and bad decisions. His management skills, non-existent. The on-delegate responsibility while taking credit, but none of that mattered. Because in my father's eyes, Natha had one thing I never would. He was the son, and that meant he was the heir, the toast that sealed my fate. It was supposed to be my night, a dinner filled with family, shareholders, and business partners, all there, the company's biggest success yet. I sat at my father's right hand. This was it. That this was the moment he would finally acknowledge that I had saved Renshaw Global. But instead, my father rose to his feet, lift crystal glass, and felt like a knife in my back. He said, changed everything. Nathan will be taking over as CEO. The room erupted in applause. I felt the air leave my lungs. I felt every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every fight I had won, meaningless because in the world my father had built, bloodline mattered more than merit. I could feel Nathan's smug grin across the table. I could see the silent approval in my father's eyes, as if I had Sim keeping his seat warm until the rightful heir was ready. I expected to feel rage. I expected to feel betrayal. But instead, I smiled. Because while my father had just given away the title, I had already taken something far more valuable: control, the art of war. They thought they had outmaneuvered me. They thought they had secured the future of Renshaw Global under Nathan's rule. But what was that I had spent years preparing for this mo? While they were focused on the throne, I was building my army. I had the loyalty of the board. I had secured key partnerships under my name, not the company's. I had legal control over the most valuable assets of Renshaw Global. Nathan could wear the crown, but he wouldn't hold the power. By the time the announcement was made, I had already, without me, the company would collapse. Nathan was stepping into a war, and I was the one who had already won it. They were about to learn. The hard way. I lifted my glass, mirroring my father's hollow toast. To Nathan, I said, may he get everything he deserves. Nathan grinned. He thought I meant success. He had no idea I meant his downfall. Because starting tomorrow, he was Stittle's don't make a leader, and I wasn't going to let him destroy what I built. I wasn't going to let him take my empire. By the time this war was over, they would all understand one thing. Renshaw Global was mine, and I would never let them take it from me again. To be continued. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated? Subscribe to Destiny Rewritten for more gripping tales of power, betrayal, and ultimate revenge. The silent takeover. The power they never saw coming. The chessboard was set. They thought they were playing chess. They thought they were the ones moving the pieces, setting the board, controlling the game. But what they didn't realize was that while my father played patriarch and my brother played heir, I was playing a different game entirely. The kind of game that doesn't unfold in grand announcements or flashy takeovers. The kind of game that happens in silence, one move at a time. 2016, the first play, buying a stake in my own future. I was 28 years old when I made my first real move. The company was bleeding money, mismanaged, directionless. My father refused to acknowledge it, doubling down on outdated strategies, while Nathan was too busy wasting millions on failed business ideas, still convinced he was a born entrepreneur. I had been saving for years, a mix of personal investments, consulting work, and careful financial planning, waiting for the perfect moment. And in 2016, that moment came. A disastrous deal had left Renshaw Global scrambling for cash. My father's pride wouldn't let him seek outside investors, and the banks weren't willing to take the risk. So I came in, quietly offering $1.5 million of my own money in exchange for a 10% stake. My father laughed. "What are you going to do with shares?" he asked. He thought I wanted a token investment, something to feel included. I signed the papers, kept my mouth shut, and took my first real step toward ownership. 2018. The lawsuit that became my leverage. The next opportunity arrived wrapped in a crisis. A lawsuit, one that my father never saw coming. A former partner accused Renshaw Global of contract fraud, claiming my father had misled investors on key business deals. The legal fees were crushing, threatening to sink years of progress. Investors panicked. The board lost faith, and for the first time, my father was desperate. So I stepped in again. This time, I didn't just offer money, I offered protection. I had contacts with top-tier legal teams, specialists in corporate defense, people who knew how to make a problem disappear quietly. I handled everything, every legal document, every settlement meeting, every conversation that my father was too proud to have himself. And in return, he signed over another 15% of his shares, bringing my 25%. One say, "It's just shares." He shrugs, "You're still family." But he didn't realize I wasn't collecting shares. I was collecting control. 2020, restructuring the board, restructuring power. By 2020, I had spent years working from the inside, solidifying my position, turning key executives and board members into allies. The company had grown stronger than ever, under-officially recognized as a leader. I needed more than just stock ownership. I needed voting power. So, when the opportunity arose to restructure the leadership preferences, I made my final move. I negotiated a new executive voting system, one that gave shareholders with operational control a weighted vote. Guess who met all the qualifications? Me. By the time Nathan was announced as CEO, I held 55% of the company, and the deciding vote on all. Nathan didn't inherit a company, he inherited a graveyard. The morning of the takeover. When they walked into the boardroom the next morning, they thought they were entering a coronation. They were walking into their own funeral. Nathan took his seat at the head of the table, flashing his signature smug grin. His birthright had finally been delivered to him. My father sat beside him, looking every bit the proud patriarch, ready to ha his life's work to his only son. I let them go through their prepared speeches. I let them enjoy the illusion for a few more minutes. Then, I stood up. "Before we move forward," I said, we need to go over the new executive structure." Nathan frowned. "What new structure?" I pressed a BA document appeared, filed and approved weeks ago. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Executive Shareholder Agreement, 2020 Revision." Nathan's grin faded. My father leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Any transfer of CEO authority must be approved by the majority shareholder." A heavy silence filled the room. Nathan glanced at my father, confused. "Dad? Dad?" My father did, and I took a slow breath. "And I can't hold 55% of Renshaw Global." Checkmate. My father's face drained of color. Nathan froze, the weight of what rashing down on him. They had spent years assuming theirs by default. They had spent years dismissing nothing more than a supporting act. But now they realized they had never been in control at all. I turned to Nathan, who still hadn't said a word. "You can keep the title. Call yourself CEO if you want. It doesn't matter. Because without my approval, you can't make a single decision in this company." Nathan finally found his voice. "That's impossible. You planned this?" I tilted my head. "What did you think I was doing for the past 12 years, Nathan?" The lesson. They never learned. My father always believed power was something passed down, something inherited like a family heirloom. Nathan believed titles made him a leader, but I knew the truth. Power isn't given, it's taken. And that morning, I didn't just take control of Renshaw Global. I proved that I had been running it all along. Nathan might have had the crown, but I I had the throne, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me ever again. To be continued. What would you have done in my position? Drop a comment below. Subscribe to Destiny Rewritten for more epic tales of power, betrayal, and revenge. The boardroom battle. The moment everything changed, 9 a.m. A palpable tension filled the air, the kind that suffocates a room before a storm breaks loose. Nathan strode in, radiating smug confidence, dressed in his perfectly tailored suit, the kind that screamed I was born to lead. Behind him, my father walked in slow, measured, but certain, as if he had already envisioned the victory speech he was about to give. The board members sat stiffly in their chairs, notebook pages unturned, hands folded as they waited for what they assumed would be a smooth transition of power. They thought I would be leaving quietly. They thought this was already decided. But they were wrong. The false confidence of men who thought they'd won my father took his seat at the head of the table, nodding toward Nathan, as if silently saying, "Enjoy the moment, son. You've earned it." Nathan adjusted his cufflinks, cleared his throat, and gave me one condescending glance, the same look he had perfected over years of dismissing me. Then, my father, with the same authoritative tone he had used my entire life, spoke the words that were supposed to seal my fate. Let's begin the transition process. A ripple of movement in the room, assistants flipping through their copies of the pre-signed documents, board members preparing their congratulatory nods. Nathan leaned forward, grinning, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. I simply slid a document across the table. The document that changed everything. No flourish, no speech. Just a simple legal contract placed directly in front of my father. A single piece of paper that shattered their illusion of control. Majority Shareholder Agreement Clause 17B. Any leadership change must be approved by the majority stakeholder. The moment Nathan saw it, the color drained from his face. My father froze, his hand hovering over the transition documents, as if he already knew what was coming next. I leaned back, crossing my legs, letting every single second of silence drag on before finally speaking. I hold 55% of Renshaw Global. A slow, deliberate pause. You don't have the authority to make this decision. A black hole of silence sucked the air out of the room. The moment they realized. They had already lost. Nathan's jaw clenched. He blinked once, twice, his mind scrambling to find a loophole. But there wasn't one, because I had made sure there wouldn't be. Across from me, my father stiffened, his expression unreadable. But I knew. I knew the moment his fingers gripped the edge of the table a little too tightly, the way his shoulders set, that he finally understood what had happened. This wasn't his company anymore, not in any way that mattered. I had taken it, piece by piece, year by year, move by move, and now? Now they were sitting at my table, in my boardroom, discussing a transition that would never happen. Nathan swallowed hard, then laughed, a short, bitter sound. "This is a joke," he scoffed. "Right?" I tilted my head. "Does it look like I'm joking?" He turned to my father. "Dad, tell her she can't do this." But my father remained silent, because he knew. And for the first time in his life, there was nothing he could do about it. Denial, rage, and the collapse of a paper. Empire. Nathan's breathing turned shallow, his smug confidence shattering into something ugly. He grabbed the contract, scanning the fine print, flipping pages as if he could will a different answer into existence. "This is a mistake," he muttered, mostly to himself. Then he turned to my father. "You signed this?" My father exhaled slowly, looking a decade older in that moment. I never thought she would use it against us." The arrogance of that statement, as if securing my place in the empire I built was some kind of betrayal. Nathan slammed the papers back onto the table. "This is fraud. You can't just—" I cut him off. "Oh, but I can." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him, my voice calm, controlled. And I did. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You conniving little—" "Watch it." My voice dropped, lethal in its quietness. You may still have the last name, Nathan, but don't forget whose name is on every single contract that matters. Power is in perception, and I had just taken theirs. Nathan wasn't just angry, he was humiliated. The board members, once ready to applaud his appointment, now sat motionless, their loyalty shifting in real time. Because they weren't stupid, they knew how business worked. And in the corporate world, loyalty isn't based on blood, it's based on power. And power had just changed hands. Nathan saw it too. The way the CFO avoided his gaze. The way the senior executives subtly turned toward me, waiting for my next move instead of his. For the first time, he realized he was no longer the heir to anything. Checkmate. My father closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, there was something else there. Not defeat, not anger, but recognition. For the first time in his life, he saw me, not as his daughter, not as the child who should have gracefully stepped aside, but as the true leader of Renshaw Global. His voice, when he finally spoke, was hoarse. "What happens now?" I smiled. "Now?" I pushed the transition papers aside and placed a fresh set of documents in front of them. "Now, we renegotiate. And that, my friends, is how you take back what's rightfully yours. What would you have done in my place? Drop a comment below, subscribe to Destiny Rewritten for more power moves, betrayals, and epic revenge stories. The Whisper War. The battle for perception power isn't just about contracts, it isn't just about percentages, legal loopholes, or boardroom votes. Power is also about perception. And my father and Nathan, they knew that. They had lost in the boardroom, but instead of accepting defeat like rational men, they turned to a different battlefield, the whisper networks, the media, and the minds of the people who had once stood by them. Like cornered animals, they fought the only way they knew how, through manipulation, through lies, through carefully calculated attacks on the one thing they thought could destroy me, my reputation. The power of a whisper. The first sign of war came through old alliances, whispered phone calls, and carefully crafted doubts. My father reached out to our oldest investors, men who had known him for decades, men who believed in legacy over merit, men who had once shaken his hand and called him a visionary. I imagine the conversations went something like this. "Lisa is too ruthless. She doesn't understand loyalty. She's making reckless moves. Do you really want your money tied to someone so unpredictable? You trusted me for 30 years. Trust me again. This company won't survive under her leadership." And Nathan? Nathan did what he always did best. He lied. He whispered stories of my instability, painting a picture of a woman too obsessed with winning to care about the company, too power-hungry to see the bigger picture. "I wasn't a leader," he said. "I was an opportunist." He spread rumors to board members, to executives, even to longtime employees. "She's unhinged. She's turning this company into her personal vendetta. She'll burn everything down just to prove a point." And then, the final blow came. A carefully orchestrated press release, one I'm sure had been drafted long before the boardroom battle had even begun. Renshaw Global faces leadership crisis. A family war erupts over power. The article spread like wildfire, faster than I could shut it down. The public ate it up. The headlines? They were brutal. Corporate dynasty crumbles as daughter stages power grab. A CEO without a crown. Lisa Renshaw's battle against her own blood. Is she too dangerous to lead? They thought this was the move that would break me. They thought public doubt was my Achilles heel. But they forgot one thing. I had spent 12 years preparing for war. The real battle begins. They wanted to fight in shadows and whispers. Fine. But I had no interest in fighting a quiet war. So I did what they never expected. I dragged their secrets into the light. If they wanted to talk about me, then the world was about to hear the real story. Because power isn't just about winning behind closed doors. It's about controlling the narrative, and I was about to rewrite every single word of it. The counterattack, tearing their lies apart. I had one advantage my father and Nathan didn't. I had the truth. So I made one phone call, not to the board, not to the investors, but to an old friend in investigative journalism. I have something for you. A package of evidence. Years of hidden financial mismanagement. Nathan's failed ventures, ones my father had secretly covered up. A trail of deals that had nearly bankrupted Renshaw Global before I took over. I had spent years quietly fixing their mistakes. Now, I was done protecting them. 24 hours later, the headlines changed, turning the narrative in my favor. The same news outlets that had once questioned me, now they were writing about the corruption I had uncovered. Behind the scenes at Renshaw Global, a legacy of hidden debts and cover-ups. Lisa Renshaw wasn't the problem, she was the solution. The real power struggle, how one woman saved the company from financial ruin. The investors? They stopped returning my father's calls. The board? They stopped listening to Nathan's pleas. Because the truth had one undeniable effect. It shattered the illusion they had built. The aftermath, the final nail in their coffin. Nathan tried to fight back. He released a desperate statement. Lisa is twisting the facts. This is nothing but a smear campaign. I was supposed to be CEO. She stole this company from me. But it didn't work, because by then, it didn't matter. The investors had already made their decision. The board had already seen the truth. The public? They weren't interested in the sob story of a privileged man who had failed upwards his entire life. The final blow? Nathan was forced to step down. My father sold off his remaining shares, disappearing from the company altogether. And I? I was now the uncontested CEO of Renshaw Global. The war was over. And I had won. Lessons from the Whisper War. What did I learn? One, power isn't about the title, it's about control. Nathan had the title, I had the control. That's why I won. 2, your reputation isn't your weakness, it's your weapon. They thought turning the media against me would destroy me. Instead, I used it to bury them. 3, anticipate betrayal, because it will come. I had spent years preparing for their backstabbing. That's why it didn't catch me off guard. For never fight in the shadows when you can burn the whole house down. They wanted to whisper in dark corners. I made sure the whole world was watching. 5, don't just build a business, build your leverage. If I had relied on legacy or trust, I would have lost everything. Instead, I built an unshakable foundation of power before they even saw the fight coming. The final word. They thought I was just a temporary player. They thought they could strip me of everything I built. They thought they could turn my reputation against me. Instead, I turned their empire into ashes and rebuilt it as my own. And that, my friends, is how you win a war before your enemy even realizes the battle has begun. What would you have done in my place? Drop a comment below. Subscribe to Destiny Rewritten for more power moves, betrayals, and stories of ultimate revenge. The counterstrike. When the hunter becomes the hunted, revenge isn't about anger. It's about strategy. It's about precision. It's about knowing exactly when to strike, so that when you do, your enemies don't even realize they've already lost. I had spent years preparing for this moment, and now it was time to end them. The first move, exposing the truth. Nathan and my father thought they had the advantage. They thought they could turn the board, the media, and the investors against me. They forgot one thing. The truth was always on my side. And now, I was going to unleash it. The leaked documents, ripping off the mask. I had spent years cleaning up their mess. Years covering for their reckless decisions. Years fixing the financial disasters my father and brother had left behind. And now, I had proof. So I did what they never saw coming. I leaked everything. The fraudulent contracts my father had approved. The failed ventures Nathan had bankrupted under the family name. The hidden debts that would have crushed Renshaw Global had I not stepped in. I sent the documents to every major financial journalist I knew. And then, I waited. The boardroom bombshell. The moment they realized it was over. The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. 9 a.m. The tension was suffocating. Nathan strolled in, confidence dripping off him. My father? He stood beside him, already assuming this was just another routine meeting. They still thought they were in control. I let them sit down. I let them speak. I let my father clear his throat, getting ready to deliver another pointless speech about family unity and leadership transition. And then, I slid a file across the table. The reports, the hidden debts, the undeniable proof of their failures. Silence. Complete, deafening silence. Then, I spoke. Renshaw Global has grown by 300% under my leadership. We have expanded into 6 new markets, secured multi-million-dollar contracts, and stabilized finances that were once on the verge of collapse. Yet, my father and Nathan attempted to remove me from power, based on nothing but ego. I let those words hang in the air. Then, I delivered the final blow. Effective immediately, Nathan will be stepping down. My father will relinquish his remaining influence. And if anyone here has an issue with that, feel free to take it up with our shareholders and investors, who are now reading the same reports you are. My father paled. Nathan? He froze. For the first time, they realized they had already lost. The media takeover, seizing the narrative. Of course, my father and Nathan weren't going to go quietly. They tried one last desperate move, a public plea. Lisa is twisting the facts. She's power-hungry. This is a betrayal of family. They tried to paint me as the villain, but it was too late. Because while they were busy crying to the press, I was already controlling the headlines. The news broke before they even had a chance to react. Renshaw Global thrives under new leadership, the takeover that saved a company. Exclusive, leaked documents reveal the truth behind the Renshaw scandal. Nathan Renshaw steps down amidst corporate shakeup. I owned the conversation. I dictated the narrative. I left no room for doubt. The final blow. When they realized there was no way out, Nathan vanished. The moment the board backed me, he knew there was nothing left for him here. He took the buyout option and disappeared. He wasn't CEO. He wasn't even a board member. He was nothing. And my father? He was powerless. The man who had once controlled everything was now left with nothing but his last name. With the board, media, and investors behind me, the war was officially over. Lessons from the Counter-Strike 1. The best revenge isn't just taking back what's yours. It's making sure they never recover. Nathan thought he could just inherit power. I made sure he left with nothing. 2. Never fight the battle your enemy expects. Change the battlefield. They tried to turn the media against me. I used it to bury them instead. 3. Power is built long before the war begins. I had been securing my control for years, so when the fight finally came, it was already too late for them. 4. The truth is a weapon when used correctly. My father and Nathan never expected their own failures to be their downfall. 5. Some people don't deserve redemption, only consequences. They wanted me gone. Instead, they were the ones who had to walk away. The war is over, but my reign has just begun. They thought they could erase me. Instead, I erased them. And now, Renshaw Global belongs to me. What would you have done in my place? Drop a comment below. Subscribe to Destiny Rewritten for more power moves, betrayals, and stories of ultimate revenge. The final call, when the king falls 2 days. That's how long it took for my father to finally admit what he had known all along. He had lost, the battle was over, the war was decided, and he wasn't the victor. I let his call ring 3 times before answering, not out of hesitation, but to let him feel the weight of his own defeat. Then I answered. Silence. Finally, he sighed. We need to talk. A conversation that came too late. I leaned back in my chair, glancing out of the towering glass windows of my office. My office. The very one he had assumed I would walk away from. The very one he had intended for Nathan. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Not just exhaustion, acceptance. I knew the tone. I had heard it before. It was the voice of a man who had once stood on top of the world and now had nowhere left to stand. I didn't respond. I wanted to hear what he had to say. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. I underestimated you. Not an apology, not regret, just acceptance of the inevitable. I let the words settle. Years ago, that sentence would have meant everything to me. Years ago, I would have ached for his approval. But now it didn't matter, because I hadn't fought this war for his validation. I had fought it for my survival, the weight of his own decisions. You burned this bridge, I said calmly. He sighed again. I never wanted it to end like this. I almost laughed at the irony. Did he really believe that? Did he really think he could strip me of everything I built and still hold my loyalty? That I would simply accept being cast aside for the sake of tradition? He thought I would break. Instead, I had proven him wrong. And now he had to live with the consequences of his own choices. Nathan's disappearance, a man who couldn't survive his own failures. And Nathan? I finally asked. Another pause. Then the bitterness in his voice slipped through. He took the buyout and disappeared. Just like that. No final fight. No last stand. Nathan had done what he had always done. Run. When things got too difficult, when reality hit him harder than he expected, he ran. I knew him too well. I knew the moment he lost, he wouldn't stay and fight. He wouldn't try to rebuild. Because deep down, Nathan had never been capable of standing on his own. He had spent his whole life failing upwards, shielded by my father's influence, propped up by a safety net he never earned. But once that net was gone, he had nothing left, and so he disappeared. The end of an era. I'm retiring, my father finally admitted. I closed my eyes. I had already known. This wasn't just about losing the company. This was about losing control. For decades, he had been the patriarch, the decision maker, the man everyone listened to. But now he was just another man in a world that had moved on without him. I'll sell my remaining shares, he continued. I'll keep a small percentage as an investor, but I won't be involved anymore. The weight in his voice was unmistakable. He had finally accepted it. This company no longer belonged to him. It belonged to me. His last words to me. For a moment, there was nothing left to say. Nothing but the truth of where we now stood. He had tried to take everything from me, and in the end, he was the one who walked away with nothing. You did well, he finally admitted. It was as close to an apology as I was ever going to get. I could hear the struggle in his voice, because for the first time in his life, he was acknowledging that I wasn't just his daughter. I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't temporary. I was the one who should have been in power all along. And now there was no one left to deny it. Lessons from the fall of a dynasty. When I hung up the phone, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel relief. I just felt certainty. One power isn't given. It's taken. I had spent years securing my place so that when the battle came, I was untouchable. 2. Some legacies are built to crumble. My father had always believed that a son should inherit the empire. He never realized that Hiblan loyalty to bloodline over merit would be his downfall. 3. Not everyone deserves redemption. Nathan had never D's and he ran. 4. When you rewrite destiny, you leave no room for doubt. They thought they could my story. Instead, I had rewritten theirs. A new era begins with my no more shadows, no more limits, no more fighting for a place that should have been mine all along. And as I sat in my office, over low, I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation, because I had already won. And now, I would build something so strong that no one would ever dare challenge me again. Would you have done the same? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to Destiny Rewritten for more stories of power, betrayal, and ultimate revenge. Lessons from the battle. 1 year later, Renshaw Global hit $100 million in valuation, new leadership, and most complete control. And as I stood in my corner office overlooking the skyline, they never saw me as a leader, so I became they couldn't ignore. Lessons from a takeover. Power isn't given, it's taken. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Your biggest threats are the ones closest to you. Reputation is a weapon. Control the narrative, and you control the boardroom. Prepare for war, even before prepare for war, even before they declare it. I never looked back, because in the end, victory tastes sweeter when they never saw it coming. The final word, they thought I would crumble. They thought they could take everything from me and walk away untouched. They thought I would be the one to lose. Instead, they were the ones who lost everything. Nathan, gone, stripped of his title, his influence, and the empire he thought was his birthright. My father, retired, a king without a throne, watching the company he built thrive under the daughter he underestimated. Renshaw Global, stronger than ever, now valued at 100 million and expanding beyond anything they ever imagined. And me? I'm not looking back. Because once you win, once you take what's yours, there's only one rule left. Never let them take it from you again. This was never just their legacy. It was mine all along. And now, the whole world knows it. What would you have done in my place? Drop a comment below. Subscribe to Destiny Rewritten for more stories of power, betrayal, and ultimate revenge. Because trust me, this was just the beginning.